hello everyone, and welcome today to our community education webinar for 2020, the final one for our year. And we're talking about grief and bereavement during the holiday period. So my name's Shyla, I'm the CEO of Palliative Care Queensland, and really delighted that you can all join us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and seas of wherever we meet today and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I'm based in Brisbane at the moment, so in my case, I'm on the Jagera and the Turrbal people's land and really pay respect to them as the traditional owners of this land where we are today, and recognise that people across the whole country are actually, some participants from all different locations are here today, and recognise those elders there too. So at PCQ, we believe that the way we care for our dying is a significant indicator of the kind of society we are. And our organisational priorities are that all Queenslanders are able to live every day until their last, are able to have a dignified death regardless of illness, age, culture or location, and have access to a supportive social network at the end phase of life and the choice of quality palliative care. So before we hear from our wonderful speakers today, I'd like to start with all the housekeeping things. Now, it's a bit different when you do these online. So if we can start with the chat function in Zoom. If you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat function there. And this is a way that you can ask questions in this space. We also have a Q&A point as well, where you can ask questions which we'll use during the panel at the end. But if we start with just testing out the chat function, if you can hover over that, and then maybe if everyone can write something there, if you've got ability to do that, don't worry if you can't, but if you want to write something there, maybe about, since we'll go with this theme, what's your favourite tradition or ritual during the holiday season? So just thinking about some rituals and traditions that we all do during the holidays that is really special to us. And just pop them in the chat function. And you can see that there is, just make sure your chat function is set to everyone. So everyone receives it, or it might say panelists and all. There we go, we can see some coming through now. Wonderful. Lots of things about families. It's a big part of it all. And Christmas lunch, that reminds me I better get organised for my family. Spending time with family, beautiful. And friends, it's been a very different year this year, so I think Christmas will be really special for everyone, definitely. So I would like to start to introduce you to our two speakers here today, and I'll just mention that Dr. Lee Donovan was going to join us, but she's actually in a remote part of Queensland, and so unfortunately can't join us today. So Lee is from Children's Health Queensland Bereavement Service and a real supporter in this space and a real expert in bereavement in Queensland, and particularly around the children's space or paediatric space. So she's provided a few useful resources that will pop up in the chat function with some links for people if that's of use. So it's lovely that she's been able to share them with us. So now for our first speaker, I'd love to introduce you to Anita. Anita is a member of the Australian Counselling Association, ACA, as a counsellor and the ACA College of Supervisors. She has extensive experience in as a psychotherapist and a specialist bereavement counsellor. She currently works as a counsellor, trainer and assessor for the Australian Centre for Grief and Bereavement. She's a certified bereavement practitioner, a registered educator and clinical supervisor, as well as a volunteer supervisor for Lifeline. She also runs her own private practice. So really appreciate you taking your time to have a chat with our group today. Thanks. Over to you, Anita.
Thanks, Shyla, and hello everyone. Thanks, Shyla. Thank you. Maybe I should share my screen here. Thank you, Martha and Jason. It's lovely to be on a panel with you. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen, and hopefully I can get this started seamlessly once that gets out the way. Acknowledge that today is perhaps a painful day for some, because what I'm doing is I'm reminding you of your grief and your loss. And so I just want everyone to really look after themselves. Ring Lifeline if for some reason you can't stay on the line and you do need some support, or ring a trusted friend. This is being recorded, so if you can't stay with us, then please know that you can access the recording later. So let's get started together. I'm standing on Jajawarong and Wadawurrung country down here in central Victoria, and I'm sure you're up there in the north, and I hope you're standing on land and not standing in puddles, because I understand it's quite wet up there. But anyway, let's get started. So I'm going to bring the bus down a little bit. I'm going to ask you to use the chat function to maybe just put in there, you know, we've had a lovely thing about families and friends and so on, but there might be things you're dreading about Christmas too. That's kind of where I go to the dark places and look in the, you know, the corners where all the fur bunnies are, and I say, okay, what's not working though? That's great that all of that's going well, but it's not, what's not working? So what are you dreading? And if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, so that we can kind of get an understanding of what's happening for you in your life, because Christmas isn't always great for people, especially not at this time. You know, we have the pressure very much to be talking about love and family, but we're also going to be talking a little bit about loss today, and how we can manage that. So a great man in the field that I work in, which is grief and bereavement, once said that grief is the price we pay for love. And later on, Queen Elizabeth stole that, like the royalties are apt to do. She stole that, and she talked about Princess Diana and said that, you know, grief is the price we pay for love. So we just really always want to remember that at the heart of our suffering is very much this experience that we have of our loved ones. So to hold those that we love in mind is really important at these kind of challenging times. So let's think about grief a little bit. We know that grief is a really individual thing. It's as individual for each person as your fingerprint. And it's not a disorder, it's not a disease, it's not a sign of weakness. It's an emotional, physical and spiritual necessity. It's the price you pay for love. And the most important thing to remember here is that the only cure for grief is to grieve. It's an active process, and we need to kind of understand what happens. So, you know, it's complex. We're often pulled into all more directions when we are in that active state of grieving. We can feel, we want to hold on to the grief and we want it to be over. In a way, we welcome the kind of the mental pain, yet we also want it to go away. And we want to get on with our lives, but we have trouble doing that with any enthusiasm. We need other people, but at the same time, we kind of have trouble connecting to them. And we know the person's died, but we can't understand how that can be gone. So you can see how we're really being pulled in at least two directions. And we can't stop thinking about that person who died, even though we've lost them forever. So, you know, as I've said before, it is a particularly challenging time for us now, isn't it? On certain days like Christmas, you know, everyone's meant to be happy and jolly, but really the emotions can be overwhelming. And I'll talk about those emotions in a second, but I'll keep on talking a little bit about what we understand about grief and how it kind of works on a daily basis. So the everyday experience of grief, we learn to live with. We have our loss, and it's often, you know, all-consuming. It's the biggest thing in our lives. We can't think about anything else in those first days and weeks. And then, you know, we notice that life starts to intrude a bit. We start to become aware of the rest of life, that we have to take the dog for a walk, that we have to buy the groceries and so on. So we really want to be mindful that there's going to be a bit of movement between these two aspects of our experience, that we are going to be dipping into our loss, and we are also going to be experiencing the reality of the rest of our lives. And we want to remind ourselves that we adapt over time. It's a naturally adaptive process, and that we can move in and out of it. We remind ourselves that grief is powerful and exhausting, and sometimes we can overdose on it, especially on peak days. And that's not helpful when we overdose on it, like any strong medicine that we take. So remembering that the only cure for grief is to grieve, but this is very, very strong medicine. And getting the dose of that medicine and the timing of that medicine right is very tricky. It's worthwhile because it helps us adapt to it. And it's important to think about this idea of moving between these two aspects of your life, so that they are no longer separate, but perhaps more incorporated. And what we know about grief is that in the first days and weeks, you might colour in a circle, and this represents your grief. Most people think that over time, that grief is going to lessen and that your life will stay the same. But what actually happens over time is that you grow around your grief and you get bigger. So the grief stays the same. It's going to be part of your life forever. That's how important this loved one is to you. But it is actually helpful to know that you need to know that you're going to change, that you're going to adapt, and so on. So keeping with this idea of medicine and intervention, you know that when we're sick, we use a thermometer to measure that we're sick, and a fever is often the indication that we're sick, especially, you know, if we're thinking of current times. So I also want to kind of talk to you about how you can take your internal temperature. And this is a way that you can use, it's a helpful way for you to use that, to know that you're starting to get agitated. So imagine that you've got this internal thermometer that lets you know, well, I'm at 0, I've got no distress whatsoever. So I'm sitting in the green, I'm quite good. But then if you start to notice that you're getting agitated, then that internal thermometer is going to be rising. And if you start to get around 60, that's moderate to strong distress, and so on. And then up at 100, you're sitting at maximum distress. So what we want to be thinking about then is that if we were doing that, then we would absolutely need to be intervening around about a 60. We wouldn't want you to overload in any way and get too agitated. So when your distress is getting high, you could do well to intervene with some distressing techniques. So there's, you know, wisdom in counting to 10, looking at a flower, taking a moment to step back. So here's how it works. If you imagine that 0 is no distress and 100 is the most distress you've ever felt, could you just now take that temperature, that internal thermometer, and think, well, when I think about Christmas lunch, what is my level? Am I thinking of all the love in the family, or am I starting to think about the potential conflict that might be there with Great Aunt Maud or Uncle Fester, who's sitting there, you know, angry about the will, or cranky about the fact that the ashes didn't get spread where he wanted them spread. So just take that internal temperature. When I think about Christmas lunch, where's my distress level sitting? Now let's imagine that your distress level is sitting at about a 50, okay? So you're right in the middle there, uncomfortable, but still managing okay. And then let's imagine that you're sitting next to Uncle Fester and he starts up about the ashes. And then you're going to notice that your temperature starts to rise of distress. Now it's when you can check in with yourself, oh, I'm starting to get agitated, that you might then need to take a step out, have a drink of water, go out and wash your hands, go to the toilet, whatever you need to do, because this way we're helping you monitor and regulate your own distress, because you don't want to get into an argument about the ashes at Christmas lunch. That is definitely one to say, let's talk about that next week, Uncle, I'll give you a call. And so this is subjective. It's yours. It's not the same as his. It's a measure, a unit measure of distress. And so you can be taking your internal temperature constantly throughout the day so that you can be regulating yourself and checking in with yourself so that you're not getting too agitated. So there's one skill that I wanted to leave you with. And I also now want to talk a little bit about the idea of honouring our loved ones on the day. So we no longer talk about letting go, moving on, any of those terrible words. We actually talk about a continuing bond. And when we think about this, we know that death ends a life and not a relationship. We still love people when they're not physically present. So that's not going to change because someone's actually died. You're still going to love them. So there are things we can do symbolically to connect with our absent loved ones. Things like this lovely idea of making a teddy out of, Nana's loved cardigan, popping the glasses on Teddy, or maybe even knitting with her wool some cuddly teddy bears and so on. So in this way of still having a symbol of her love with you. There's also ceremonies or rituals that you might want to engage in. A lot of people have balloons. They'll write a message to their loved one. Often that's done with children. And this is a lovely quote from a mother, Lockie's mother. She says that, you know, for her, the rituals develop over time, bring a calmness to her heart and a framework to build the day around, and the satisfaction of an outlet to express the undying love that continues for them. So that's Lockie's mum. And so that she talks about rituals actually holding the day. So they might plant a tree, or they might let the balloons go and so on. So there might be a way of structuring your day around a certain action that brings your loved one to mind. It might be lighting a candle. It might be talking, you know, planting a tree like she did. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I just wanted to share that beautiful thing with you. So we know that rituals are an important part of our lives. Some cultures more than others have rituals that are very set. Other people might invent their own rituals and so on. So there's lots of, you know, you might want to cook someone's favorite meal, or bring in a piece of jewelry that's theirs, or a photo and so on. It's nice to kind of honor the elements. Traditionally in rituals, ceremonies, there's the elements of fire and water and so on. And you might want to do that if someone particularly loved gardening. Maybe you plant a tree for them, or something that has you know, a connection to your loved one, such as this, where one of my colleagues shared this with us. This is their bird bath. And so the year after Ian died, all of his friends went into his garden and gathered flowers and brought them and put them on his in his bird bath. And it was a lovely way of acknowledging that first anniversary of his death. There's lots of things people do. There's you can organise a memorial hike, a bike ride, plant a tree, a memorial garden, and so on. Donate time or money in there on our memory books, boxes, and Facebook memorial pages. A ceremony of remembrance is a lovely thing too, that can be a shared one. Here in Ballarat, we have that for children that have passed away during the year. I just, in this little clip here, the photo you can see, that's in Atsuchi, which is where the tsunami was, and someone put an old telephone box in his garden, and people who'd lost their loved ones when they hadn't actually found bodies and so on, they'd go into the phone box. It was an old kind of dial phone box, and they'd ring they'd just dial the number even though there was no line, and they'd just talk to them. And this is how we can symbolically represent these connections to our loved ones, because, you know, it can be it can be a time when we want to reach out and we don't know how to do that. But speaking about what we do on the day, I just really want to encourage people to have realistic expectations, knowing, you know, that everyone's pressured after coming back out of a pandemic. No one expected that. No one expected to be where we are today. You might not have expected that it was your loved one's last Christmas, or that this will be their last Christmas. And so it's really important that we know that expectations can be, yes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, you know, be perfect, whereas reality is often a curly beast, and it throws us curveballs. And I really love this quote here, you know, the key to happiness is to lower your expectations. There you go, really nice and low, because that way you're more likely to achieve. Lowering the bar is something that friends and colleagues of mine, we often laugh that we can't get any lower. We're at rock bottom, but we can still have a laugh about that and show ourselves some acts of kindness. So another thing to think when we're thinking, well, how do we have realistic expectations on the day? And I also just want to encourage people to think that, look, avoidance is a strategy. I have clients who are literally saying, I am not doing Christmas this year. It's way too hard. And, you know, I understand that we naturally try to avoid pain. And if this date or any date really is just too much for you, you might want to avoid it. It's the short-term strategy. You probably know that suffering is part of life, and we want to avoid it, but we can't avoid it for long, because it's also about life, you know, hitting us in the face occasionally. You have to learn to deal with that. But if it's going to work for you, and you can avoid Christmas, and that's the way you're going to go, then no one's going to judge you on that. It might be a good idea to put a Facebook or a message out and just say to people, look, for me this year, Christmas is a no-go zone, so please be kind to me, and I'm avoiding it. But just know that eventually you are going to have to come back and do the work you need to do. And hopefully the lovely people here at Palcare will be able to support you in that when you're ready. So on the day, how are we going to do this? How are we going to actually get through this day? So it's possible for you to have a plan, to be as formal as that, and write down the things that you can do to cope, because we know that we're in the thick of it, and Aunt Maud or Uncle Fester's firing up. We can forget that we need to calm ourselves down and what we need to do. So it's a handy thing just to brainstorm what you can do, the things you can do to cope. Go for a drink of water, take a few deep breaths. I can talk to these people to help me feel better. You might have someone at the lunch that you've given the heads up to, that if they notice you're getting into a deep and meaningful, to just touch your shoulder and say, how you doing? Let's go out for a walk in the garden, or whatever it might be. I can think these thoughts, and it might be as if your loved one is there saying, oh, there goes Uncle Fester, he always fires up, doesn't he? Something like that. What thoughts can you think that might give you some solace in these challenging times? And then how I plan to take care of myself by setting a timer, and as soon as the timer goes off, oh, there's my phone, sorry, got to take a phone call. And you look after yourself by having a bit of an escape plan, because we know that it can get a bit darker over the Christmas turkey, and you know, kids firing off and everything. So always remember, lower your expectations and really bring it down to a manageable level. Have a goal. What do I want to do? I want to avoid Uncle Fester, but I definitely want to touch base with you know, my sister. And so have that goal, and once you've achieved your goal, revise whether or not you want to leave. You don't have to stay there forever. You don't have to stay there till, you know, when you used to leave. You can actually choose when you leave. One of the things that's nice to consider doing at these lunches is maybe raising a glass to absent friends, or in some way honour that continuing bond. Often I find a lot of my clients say, no one mentions his name anymore. You know, I want to make sure that people remember him and how much he loved Christmas. Or, you know, here's a drink to Dad, how much he hated Christmas. He would have hated being here. You know, here's to Dad, or whatever it is. And it's a really lovely thing in some way to think about. So clients are going to have photos, maybe on the mantelpiece or somewhere nearby. One of my clients is tucking some of her husband's ashes into a little pouch that she has and tucking them into her bra. No one need know, but for her, every time she puts her hand on her heart, she's comforted by the fact that she's got her husband with her. So you can have a way that makes that connection for you to honour that bond. As we said, it doesn't end a relationship. So another thing that might seem obvious is to find moments of joy. Now, sometimes we have to eke them out. Sometimes we literally have to find them and work hard to find them. But it's important at these times of transition or ceremony or a celebration that we think, I need to just take a moment out here and look at the kids opening their presents, or just to be able to bring some positive emotions to what's going on, because we know that positive emotions, when we're feeling them, they help us feel better, they help us think clearer, they help us solve problems, they work in ways on our physical well-being that we don't fully understand. So in addition to missing your loved one, which is definitely going to happen, maybe try to find ways to allow yourself and your other loved ones to experience these positive feelings and share the warmth and love of the people around you. It might be, you know, talking about how beautiful the meal is, or how great the kids are, or something like that. And it might even be something like having a joke, you know, like, let's, you know, who knows what to do. I don't recommend this. I think DHSS will be called, but something like that, just to take some moments for joy. Because it's really important that in all of this, you take good care of yourself and let others take care of you. This is just a little graphic of working with kids, where you can, you know, put a hand in, and who are the people that you can call on when you need that helping hand. Because most of you are great caregivers, but not too great at receiving care. That same, you know, we love giving care to our loved ones. So we also need to allow others to care for us, because they get as much joy from that as you do. So, you know, reach out the hand, say, hey, I wouldn't mind a helping hand here. How about you bring the pavlova? Great Aunt Maud. Okay, so I've given you some strategies. Please, you know, we just want you to ask questions of us, Jason and I. That's all we're here for. But I also just wanted to draw your attention to the organisation I work for, which is the Australian Centre for Grief and Bereavement. And we have on our website there all these grief information sheets. If you go in here and you'll get the resources, that's what we have here. So we have ones for how to support someone who's grieving, you know, how to manage grief, anniversaries and so on, after the death of a child. Companion animal loss, it's often disenfranchised. People don't talk about their pets and they feel that, you know, it's not legitimate. Companion animal loss is a huge thing in our field. And so at the beginning I mentioned, you know, please contact these helplines if you're needing support, because often people feel that they're alone around Christmas time. It's important for you to know that you can reach out. Charlotte mentioned I worked for Lifeline, volunteer for Lifeline, and often when I did a shift on a Christmas day, I was amazed that we didn't have more calls. And I think a lot of people were thinking, oh no, other people, you know, need to call. Lifeline is there for anyone. It's not just there for you if you're feeling suicidal. It's there for anyone who feels they're in crisis. And 10-minute chat, you know, I'm just feeling a bit stuck. What can I do? That's what we're there for. We can just give you some strategies or talk you through a tough time. So that's me done. Have I not reached my full 15 minutes, Charlotte? I could talk for 3 hours, but I'm happy to stop if Jason's ready, or are there any questions for me?
Absolutely perfect. It was wonderful to hear all those little handy hints. Very practical session as well. So great. Thank you so much for sharing both. Lots of great theory there, but then also those handy hints. A few of them I hadn't thought about. So I was busily writing some notes for myself as well. So thank you for that. We'll go over to Jason now, and then we'll jump to some Q&A questions after that. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them up in the Q&A tab at the moment. But now I'd love to introduce you to Jason. So Jason is a bereavement coordinator here at Palliative Care Queensland, and he's a qualified counsellor with a special and personal interest in grief and loss and bereavement care. He's worked as a grief and bereavement counsellor in Brisbane for the past 3 years. And after the death of his mother and then his wife, who's the mother of his 2 children, who's 2 young boys, in a very short period of time, Jason has a passion to help people and walk with them through the grief and loss journey, sharing his life and experience of his journey. So really appreciate you taking your time, Jason, to share some of your experience. Over to you now.
No worries. Thank you, Shyla, and thank you, Anita. That was great information for everybody, that, you know, how to deal with these, cope with these grief through this long journey that we have, because that's the hard part. It is a long journey, and we need these tools to be able to cope with grief and loss, because it does stay with you. My background, so I'm sort of coming from a lived experience. As Shyla said, I have 2 young boys who at the time of their mother's death were 5, 4 and 9, actually, 4 and 8. So I lost my wife 5 years ago, and you're not prepared for it. You're not prepared for the journey that you have ahead, and you don't know what it's going to be like. And these special occasions are where it really comes to the surface. So for me, coming to Christmas, especially that first year, was so tough. Like Anita said, a lot of us just want to hide and not celebrate Christmas, and not, you know, if we run and hide from it, then we don't have to acknowledge that, you know, we've lost somebody. That works part of the way for that time for some people, but it doesn't get rid of the grief. The grief is still there. For me, having 2 young boys, I had to celebrate Christmas for them. I had to make their life as normal as possible, which is so very hard to do when you're going through your own grief and trying to work forward. So having, you know, 2 young men that were now looking at me as being not only a father, but now being the mother, the nurturer, the role model. For me, Christmas, I had to do the best that I could do for them and prepare. So I knew I had to prepare for Christmas. I knew that it would be hard not having Ange, my wife, there. And as prepared as I was, you weren't ready for what was going to hit you, and that's the part that's the hardest. It's not so much the day, Christmas Day. I had family, friends, I had support. There was lots of people there for me. It's when all these people disappear. That's after, and it's preparing for the after, which is the hardest part, because all of a sudden you're prepared for that Christmas Day, you're prepared for the lunch, you're prepared for the conversations that you have to have. But once they all disappear, there's no one there and you're all alone, and that's when you reflect, and that's when you sort of you hit rock bottom. And it's preparing yourself for that time. It's knowing that, you know, it is a wave, it is a lot of journey, it's a long journey, and and what happens is that you have to be there on your own sometimes, and you have to allow yourself to grieve. That's the important part. As much as hiding my grief and trying to say, well, let's not have Christmas, let's just pretend it didn't happen, doesn't work in the long run, because grief is part of who you are. Grief doesn't disappear, and it's with you for the rest of your life. And it's allowing yourself to embrace the grief, embrace the relationship that you had with that person. So for me, losing my wife, I thought if I didn't talk about her, if I took all the photos down, if I took all that away, that I wouldn't think about her. But you do, and it's still there, and it's embracing that and saying, no, she was a part of my life, and she still is a part of my life. She may not be here physically, but she still is a part of my life. So for me, that grief over the Christmas period was very hard, and I had to move forward through that, allow myself to be able to fall apart, be not okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to let down your wall, especially as a man. Like as a man, I don't want to show people that I'm emotional and all that on Christmas Day. You know, they ask how you are, and my response was, yeah, I'm doing okay, I'm fine. When deep inside I wasn't, and I didn't want them to know that there was a weakness there that I didn't want them to see. I didn't want to make them sad. So as a man, I put up this wall, and it was working out that I had to let this wall down. I had to, you know, open myself up to how I was feeling inside and not be okay. And working through that journey with your children is very hard, because as again, you're trying not to hurt them, you're trying to bring them up to be strong young men, but they need to grieve too. And it wasn't until after Christmas when I realised that these poor kids, they went through Christmas thinking about their mum and were sad too, because, you know, Christmas was everything to mum. Christmas was, you know, from the wrapping of the presents to, you know, everything, the lunch, and she wasn't there to see the joy in their faces when they opened up these presents. And I'm sure those kids thought about that at the time, and I didn't focus on that. I focused on keeping everyone happy and that sort of stuff. And it wasn't until later on that I talked to my boys. I met a gentleman through a support group who had been on a similar journey to me, and he opened up about how he went through his journey and how he coped and the things that he did. And that's when I realised that these kids, they need to be able to express that grief. They need to be able to, you know, Angie isn't forgotten. She's still their mother. She'll always be their mother. She's always in their hearts and their memories. That doesn't disappear when someone dies. And so for us, we, you know, for Christmas time, the next Christmas, I decided, let's go and get an ornament that's just for mum. You know, you all pick the colours, we'll paint it. We you know, put all sparkly hearts and everything on it. And it's a decoration that we cherish. And every year we take it in turns, and it's the last decoration on the tree. And that's that ritual, that's that thing for us that she isn't forgotten and that she's part of Christmas. So for us, putting that on the tree is a memory, and it shows that she is still part of it. The relationship is still there. She's still with us on Christmas Day. When we unwrap those presents, that bauble's up there, and it has her name on it, and it's got all her pretty colours. And my boys always look at it, and, you know, she's with us when we do those sort of things. All these special occasions, not just Christmas, you know, going through grief and loss, these special occasions happen frequently throughout the year. For me, Mother's Day was really hard for me. For my kids, I had to, because Mother's Day is so confronting, and so, you know, schools do the Mother's Day stores and all this sort of stuff. I used to take my kids out of school and say, You know, I won't let you, you won't be upset because you haven't got a mother and everyone else is buying presents for their mother, and keep them home from school. But that wasn't the right way, because for them, they needed to grieve. So the way I worked around that was to give them money, let them go to the Mother's Day store and they buy something that we can take to the cemetery and we can go and give to mum. And we do. So on the Mother's Day store, we go, they buy something special that they can put at the cemetery, and we do that. I saw that Anita had the pictures of balloons and things like that. We do all that. We you know, Mother's Day, birthdays, the kids write a letter, we stick it in the balloon, and that's part of a ritual that we have. And I think part of the embracing of grief is being able to have these rituals and these moments, whether it be Christmas, whether it be Mother's Day, birthdays, where we can celebrate this person, because this person is who we are. This person is inside us, and just because they're not here physically, they're still part of us. So having these little rituals and ways of being able to express our grief, you know. We go to the cemetery on Christmas Day. One of our other traditions is, after we've done presents and we've done breakfast and all that sort of stuff, we go to the cemetery and we go out there, and the kids usually put a little Christmas ornament or something we get from the $2 shop, and they put it out there, and we all cuddle and we all grieve and we all, you know, we let our emotions out, and then we enjoy Christmas Day. But for those of you that's your first Christmas, it is so hard, and you need to, as Anita said, we need to be able to monitor how we're feeling. Don't, you know, when you feel that anxiety and you feel that it's overwhelming and that you can't do it, take that break. Setting the phone, I thought that was a fantastic idea. Just go for a walk, just get the fresh air, the sun, go outside and enjoy it. But don't feel that you have to keep everybody happy. You can let down your wall, you can cry on someone's shoulder. You can, and that's the hardest part through grief, is to ask for help, to ask for support. And as family and friends, you know, being that person that's there, you can't fix it, but you can be there in their presence and give them that space and give them that cuddle and that time and that energy to help them through that. And that's an important part of it, is being able to you don't always have to be okay. And grief is like that, you know. People often think, you know, there's stages of grief and there's a circle, and this is the stage, and then you go to this stage, and then you don't go from this stage to this stage. You go all over the stages. One day you could be fine, the next day you might not be. You know, for me, I remember one time I was in a delicatessen. I was buying some ham, and I heard a song that was playing over the thing. Next minute I was bawling, asking for $2 worth of ham, and I was crying. And this, I'll never forget it, but this woman, who was a stranger, just came around the counter, gave me a cuddle and said, "It's okay. It's okay." And it is okay. And that's part of grief. It's a very long journey. And as I said, and it's remembering that loved one, and it's remembering that they are part of you no matter what happens in your life journey. You know, that whole surrounding the grief, the diagram that Anita showed before. You know, I describe people as the grief is like an egg, and that the grief is the yolk of the egg, and the white is your life. And that sometimes the yolk leaks into the white. You know, sometimes that grief does break into the white, and it does become overwhelming. And it's allowing yourself to have that space to be able to express it. Because if we don't express it and we try to hide it, which is what I try to do many times, it just builds up like a pressure cooker. And, you know, the more that we sort of hide our grief and it just builds up inside us, and we don't release that valve to let that grief out, it becomes a lot. And sometimes it just knocks you down. And it's a knowing inside how you're feeling and knowing the stages that where you are. You know, if you're feeling anxious or there's something that's triggered you, allow that to happen. Just know that that's happening, and then allow yourself the space to be able to express it. You know, if it's crying in a deli, so be it. It's okay. And for someone who has young boys, the silver lining of losing my wife was that I now have two young men that are so proud. See, I get emotional when I talk about my boys, but I have two young boys who are not ashamed to express their emotions and be honest and open. You know, my boy will come to me and go, Dad, I'm really sad today. And that's okay. And we cuddle and we talk about it and we look at photos, and you know, all the memories that we have are still a part of us. And it's being able to express that with them and know that it's okay. You know, a lot of people think, and I was brought up, I've never seen my dad cry, ever. So for me, I was brought up that, you know, what's this grief stuff? I've never seen my dad go through grief. I've never been to a funeral. My first funeral was my mother in 2011. You know, I didn't know how to cope. I didn't know what grief was. I thought, you know, grief was, you'd be over it in a month, you know. My first Christmas, I remember I sent my kids away after Christmas. I sent them away to their grandparents. So my thing was that I send them away to their grandparents on this first Christmas, and I will go up to Hervey Bay, which is where we had our last little holiday, and I'll go up there and I'll grieve and I'll come back and everything will be fine. It didn't work like that. I got to Hervey Bay, I couldn't cope. I came home, and I came home to a house empty full of Christmas decorations and Christmas presents, and then my grief was really real. That was when I hit rock bottom. That was when I was like, how do I cope? I can't cope. I can't do this. It's too hard. But you do cope, and it does get better. It does get better over time, and you do, you know, it hits you when you don't expect it. But grief is not easy. And it's allowing yourself that space and that time to grieve. It's okay to grieve, especially at times like Christmas when it's so confronting, because I noticed everybody's chat comments was, you know, spending time with family. You know, some people have lost their family. So for them, it's very confronting. And being able to talk to people about that, find your supports, find the people that you can just lean on. That's all the advice I can give is that, you know, one thing I didn't do is ask for help. I didn't find the right people at the right time, and you need to do that. You need to reach out to, whether it be a friend, whether it be someone that's not part of the family or friends, that's a counsellor or something like that. Talk to someone, talk to Lifeline, whoever it is, to help you get through that really difficult time is better than doing it on your own. Because sometimes doing it on your own, it is too hard. So allow yourself that space, allow that time, especially on Christmas Day, preparing for Christmas Day, but prepare for after Christmas Day. Prepare for when everybody goes home and you're sitting there on your own and you're looking at the day that's just gone and going, wow, I wish she was here to celebrate and see the joy in everyone's face and got to taste that turkey or whatever. That's when it hits you. So allowing yourself to be prepared for that and knowing, you know, that, okay, I'm really struggling. I might ring Mary and see if she wants to come and have a cuppa with me. And if you are Mary, just be there. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be there. It's just having that one person to listen to, because going through grief, you just want to vent. You just want to let it out. You just want to talk. And you want to talk about that person. You know, I lost a lot of friends because going through grief, they thought that if they brought up Ange, I would be more upset. And I was like, why would you not talk about it? She was a part of my life. Just because she's not here doesn't mean that she's not part of my life. And that's the important part, is that person was a part of your life and still is a part of your life. And you know, your friends, just because we talk about someone who's passed doesn't mean that, you know, that it's not going to be upsetting. It's probably more upsetting because you're going, well, why aren't we talking about Ange? Why isn't she mentioned? So, you know, all I can say to the people that are going through a difficult time this year, it is hard, but you do get through it. We do cope. The world keeps turning. I know you wish that it didn't turn. You wish it would pause and you didn't have to do these things, but it does get easier. And finding that ritual and finding that special thing that you can do on Christmas Day to honour that person, you know, whether it be a bauble on the tree, whether it be a balloon in the sky, whether it be planting a plant, whatever it could be, is so important, because that person is still part of who you are and they need to be celebrated on that Christmas Day. They're still part of who you are. I think that's my wrap up there. But take care, everyone. If you need help, please go out there and ask for it. Thanks, Charlotte.
Wow, thank you, Jason. Very, very powerful. And yeah, thank you for sharing such a yeah, powerful story, and just the beauty of what you're doing with your boys and what you've done with them as well is really very impressive. I think for me, just seeing a male in this space, I think and talking so openly in this space is just something that I think is really, really important, and sadly not done as much as we'd like to see it. And I know Jason and I have had a lot of chats about, the concept of beer and bereavement, and having a bit of a chat with your mates around this space, because it often is hard for males to reach out to each other. So yeah, beautiful. So thank you both. It's just been lovely to hear these stories, and it's such an important topic to discuss. And Jason, you said something that I wrote down on my little piece of paper. I've written lots of notes, but one of them, I thought about how you said about asking Mary to come over for a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. But then if you are Mary, then that. And I think that's really important to look at both sides of it, because like you both touched on, is that concept about how community actually, what can they do in this space? There is one Q&A, so everyone, now we'll just open up to some questions. So feel free to either pop a question in chat or pop a question in the Q&A section. There's one here from Terry. Asking Jason. So Jason, despite our best efforts in a whole lot of practical ways to compensate, say, for trying to be a mother as well as a father to our children, how can we create space to acknowledge our inability to be and allow our children to experience the gap or emptiness of not being able to also be their mother as well?
Great question. For me, I could never be the mother. Like, you can never replace that person. So for me, it wasn't so much being the mother, it was trying to find that nurturing side that I probably was always there, but I never needed to use it as much. So for me, the big gap there was that, Ange was the nurturer. Ange was the one who put the Band-Aid on when they fell over. Ange was the one who, I was the disciplinarian and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it was very hard to all of a sudden take on that role and go, oh, hold on, I can't be dad here. I've got to be mum. But I can't be mum. What I can be is caring and compassionate in that space. So for me, it was a learn. I didn't do it right, and no one's going to do it right from the start. But for me, it was learning to be in that space for them and allow them to know that, look, that's probably not as good as what mum can do, but let's see what we can do and work through it that way. So for me, it was opening up to them about, look, that isn't as good as what mum could do, and letting them understand that, but let's work through this together. So we probably did it together, Terry. I think that's probably the best way to say, is that we sort of collaborated and said they'd teach me. They'd say, well, mum would do this, and okay, well, let's try it. Let's see if we can do it. And so it was a learning experience more than anything.
Beautiful. So I've got a question here, and Anita, I might pop this one to you, saying, it says, it's been years since my mother's death, but why do I still feel bad, or why don't I feel any better? So how do people respond in that way?
Yeah, I think it's such a notion, I'm going to get better. People even say to me, everyone keeps asking me, am I better yet? And it's this idea of we're forever changed. And, I think often people miss who they used to be. I used to be fun, happy-go-lucky, and I'm a misery now. It's like, well, let's look at who you are now. That idea of who you are, you've grown around your grief. What are the, I think Terry in the chat's put in this idea of what are the gifts that you got from your loved one? And there's that kind of duality where you can see that, in the field we call it post-traumatic growth, but we never say that to people because they think, well, how am I ever going to feel better? It's like, you do. Jason's spoken to that beautifully today, this idea that things change, life's dynamic, you want to stay still and so on, but it's not like that, and we adapt. But reaching out, as Jason said, to people is a huge growth thing. And I think for a lot of people who are more instrumental in their grief, not just men, but are a bit more practical, this idea of emotions can be really annoying and really pesky. And what do you mean I'm going to feel, you know, sad and cry a bit? And it's like, well, that's part of grief. You know, that water coming out of your eyes is actually tears and sadness in another form. And so just a lot of education that it's okay. I think, you know, we get a lot of stoic people who think, you know, well, it's 3 days, I should be better. So this idea of better, I think it's like moving on, letting go. I'd kind of kick it in the rubbish bin, really. I don't like that word.
I like your approach, definitely. So one I might ask for both of you that we've received is, my friend recently lost a baby and I want to be supportive, but I'm scared I'll say the wrong thing. What's the right thing to say? So I might start with Jason and then go across to Anita.
There is no wrong or right thing to say. And as I said before with the Mary comment, you don't have to say anything, you have to be there. It's more about supporting them and being there. They will say what they want to say. And that's something that I didn't understand until I went through grief, is that, you know, my friends that I lost didn't know what to say in that space. So for someone who's lost a baby, just be there for her and let her talk and let her know that you're there for her to support her in any way that you have to. And if that's a commemoration of the baby in some way, especially at Christmas time, you know, think of something that we could, an idea that you could do together. She might not want to do it, but just be there in that space is all I could say.
I couldn't agree more, Jason. And within that, though, I think, and you said it yourself, you know, what is the right thing to say or the wrong thing to say? And I've actually had people say saying nothing is the wrong thing to say. A hand on the shoulder, you know, like that lady did for you at the deli, a card. I've got no words to express my sadness for you, but I'm going to mow the lawns. And whatever you say you're going to do. Because when I've been in this situation, if someone says, oh, you know, I'm going to do this, and they don't do it, that hurts 1,000 times more. So offer help, offer support to your capacity. Other people's grief can often trigger your own past grieves. And so, you know, you want to really be looking after yourself in any endeavours. But, you know, just that human presence, connecting to the common humanity in that suffering, I think is really important. But, you know, just going around and mowing the lawn without even asking, you know, or suddenly the load of dishes or, a meal or something is on the doorstep. Those acts of kindness, you know, that really touched me, what you said, Jason, about that lady coming around and giving you a hug. You know, just that, you know, often there's no words, but there are those acts. And I think in that absolute compassionate space, we can really connect. So, yeah, it's a tough one. But, yeah, good luck to everyone in that space.
I might just say, again, with that, what that lady did, the thing that she did that really, really resonated with me and helped me was that she said, it's okay. So you don't have to hide.
I'm just thinking too, Jason, this idea of saying that, you know, what if I say something and I trigger them? You know, and the thing is, you're thinking about her all the time anyway. So for someone to come up and say, look, I remember she was so lovely when she, you know, gave me a card after my baby was born or something like that. Or you know, she was so kind to me. You know, I've had a lot of acts of kindness from certain people, and putting that in a card and saying, this is what she did for me. Often people don't know those acts of kindness, they're private, but to have that shared, you know, it's like a lovely bond, a lovely connection for you. So yeah, and this hope, you know, we all kind of need hope that it's going to change, it's going to get better, it's going to shift. So yeah, I think it's okay. And in some ways, I'm here. It can be a kind of a message of it's okay, you're not alone.
Beautifully said. And I think there's someone's put some a question up there around some resources, and the team's shared a few links for everyone. SANS is a great resource in this space as well, and a great website, and obviously Centre for Grief and Bereavement as well, and Children's Health. So there's lots of different resources up there as well. Just another question around sort of anticipatory grief. Like, a lot of people, it's likely to be their last Christmas with their loved ones or their last season with their loved ones. You know, what would you talk to people around in that space, and even around memory makings and ideas like that?
Jason, I'll just, and then you can go. I think the idea is just to lower your expectations and not think you have to make the 10-hour film about the story of their life or something. But if you can just have a few moments with them and maybe write some things down, but really tune into what the loved one's able to do and be able to tolerate, because there's so much pressure around. And, you know, if we think, you know, it might be the last Christmas, so what can you do to make it a kind and gentle and memorable one for the right reasons? I have a client who's got photos of her mum in those last days, and she said she can't look at them, but we put them in a folder and put them separately on her laptop, so that if ever she wants to look at those photos, she can just say, yeah, it was really tough, wasn't it? You know, sometimes we can have things, but I really encourage people to put things out of sight and then go, you know, dose themselves if and when they need to around these things, because we don't want to overly pressurize people too much, especially it's exhausting, you know, caring for someone, they're exhausted and so on. So just try and pace yourselves.
Yeah, I think around anticipatory grief is, you know, cherish those moments, make the most of those moments. And it's not about making movies, and it's about being in the moment with that person and making memories. It's funny you say about the folder, Anita, because I have exactly the same folder. But for me, it's a cherished memory. I remember being there, holding her hand, being there at the last minute. But I can't look at it. And sometimes I will, and sometimes I won't. And having that option there, rather than deleting it out of your life, because it is a cherished moment. It is something that I will always cherish. But making memories of that last, you know, those last days, or, you know, if it is the last Christmas, but making it special for that person that's there as well, the person that is going through this, you know, and making as special as you can, and something that you can remember.
Beautiful. I'll also flag Jason is one of our wish coordinators too on our Ambulance Wish Queensland program. So yeah, he's very special that he takes people on their last wishes around 150 kilometres from Brisbane, and yeah, works with them in that space with our decommissioned ambulance and our volunteers. So it's a very special role to be able to be a part of that with people. It's yeah, it's one of our big things we do in PCQ that we're very proud of. I'll just also mention we have a program called Palliative Brisbane South. So if people live in the Brisbane South region, we have a project which offers counselling and support services to people in that region. It's open as well, or available throughout the working days over Christmas. So it works with community around open discussions in this space, and looks at how to ask for help and how to offer help as well for communities. And it's building a compassionate community within that region. So it's a lovely little project as well. So we might wrap up now, and just thank you all for your time, and thank you all for these beautiful discussions in this space. A big thank you to both Anita and Jason for sharing their wisdom, their stories and experiences in this space, which is really important. And thank you to everyone that asked questions and put little comments and notes and shared their stories as well. It was really delightful to hear that and to engage as much as possible in this online space that we're in. It's a new world in that space, but it's lovely to really connect, and in some way it's enabled us to connect even broader with a lot more people, which is great. For those of you who are looking for further resources, there's been some put up in the chat, but we'll also send you out an email after this, which will include some resources and some information, as well as the link to this Zoom session as well, so that you can rewatch it if there's anything you want to keep checking in around the space. I guess now it's just to really wrap up and say a big thank you to everyone, and thank you all for your time today, and to our speakers again, and have an absolutely beautiful holiday season. Look after yourselves, take care of yourselves, and take care of your community as well and your family around you. So thank you again, and we'll sign off now.